The atmosphere in the courtroom on the 16th day of the trial against Sean Diddy Combs was tense to the point of breaking. Everything seemed to freeze in anticipation. Reporters, lawyers, jurors, spectators, everyone felt that something important was about to happen. Usually, days like this in court drag on slowly. Paperwork, questioning, objections from lawyers. But this time, from the very beginning, the air became thicker, like before a storm. Even the judge looked a little more tense than usual. And then, an unexpected figure enters the courtroom, dressed in a strict dark suit without any unnecessary pomp, but with that very recognizable bearing. People can't believe their eyes. Whispers spread through the rows like a wave. Is that Clooney? George Clooney? And yes, it really is him. An actor, director, human rights activist, a man no one expected to see in this story. He steps up to the witness stand, looks straight at Diddy, and with a stony face and cold voice says, "I'm here to break the silence, Diddy." These words pierce the silence like a gunshot. Reporters barely have time to turn on their recorders. Smiles disappear from faces. Everyone listens intently, holding their breath. This is not a tabloid sensation or an actor's stunt. It is a serious, conscious statement by a man who has something to say. Clooney continues, without playing to the crowd or posing. He says that he wasn't just watching from the sidelines, he lived through it all. He was involved, he saw, he knew. And all this time he remained silent, until today. Today he decided that enough is enough. Today he is revealing the truth. Not for the sake of a show, for the sake of justice. Clooney's words don't sound like an interrogation, but like a confession, like a heavy burden he has finally decided to throw off. And at that moment it becomes clear the trial of Diddy is no longer just a high-profile case about crimes in show business. It's turning into something more. When George Clooney begins his testimony, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifts from tense to almost electric. With every word he speaks, it becomes clear that this is not just a celebrity coming to make a statement for the sake of a headline. This is a witness carrying something much heavier than just the truth. His voice is calm, but behind that composure you can sense years of tension. Clooney doesn't call Diddy a man. He describes him as a system, like a carefully constructed mechanism where every detail, from the recording studio to the personal security guards, works to hide, suppress, and intimidate. He says, "This isn't one person, it's a whole machine. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't forgive. It destroys." A deathly silence hangs in the courtroom. Even the judge puts down his pen for a moment. The prosecutors exchange glances. From the very first minutes, Clooney's testimony is described as potentially groundbreaking. If what he is about to say is confirmed, the case against Combs will take on a new dimension. Not just charges of assault, but a whole network, possibly a criminal syndicate under the guise of show business. And we may no longer be talking about a sentence of several years, but life imprisonment. The public has been wondering all this time, why did Clooney remain silent? He didn't just find himself in this environment yesterday. Why did he only decide to speak out now? Clooney himself provides the answer. He says he didn't remain silent because he was afraid for himself. He remained silent because he knew the value of this information. He had sources in the FBI. He had names, dates, records, everything he needed to paint the full picture. And he understood that the slightest mistake, a single leak, could cause someone to disappear. Just like 3 of his friends had already disappeared. People who had also tried to tell the truth. They didn't just pass away, they were erased. No bodies, no clues, just hints, guesses, and frightened relatives who were forbidden to even mention the search. Clooney looks around the courtroom and adds, "I can't live with this anymore. If I stay silent one more time, I'm an accomplice." These words sound like a sentence, not just Diddy, but everyone who helped keep this system afloat. The courtroom becomes uncomfortable. Some lawyers are literally fidgeting in their seats. Clooney is not just a witness. He has opened a trapdoor that could reveal an entire underground city built on fear, money, and complete indifference to human life. The courtroom becomes so quiet that you can hear someone in the back row nervously tapping their fingers on the armrest. George Clooney continues to speak, calmly, clearly, with a tension that has been building up for years. This is not improvisation, not a prepared speech by a PR agent. It is the confession of a man who has kept a dangerous truth for too long. He says that silence used to be his only shield. When it all started, he didn't get involved. He watched. He listened. He memorized. He saw people disappear, saw compromising information disappear, along with their careers, saw fear become currency. And even he, with his influence, connections, and name, had no illusions. He too was vulnerable. He recalls how letters written in blood-red ink were left on his doorstep. They contained no direct threats, but the meaning was clear. He was not to speak. Not a word, not a sound. And he remained silent. For a long time. Until today. Now, standing before the court, before the journalists, before the jury, he says, "Today, I am not an actor. I am not a star. I am a human being. And I will tell you what I saw with my own eyes. And this is the terrible truth." He straightens up, looks at the defendant, and utters a phrase that literally freezes the courtroom. Diddy built a criminal empire, and I was one of his victims. These words explode like a shockwave. The shock is not just in the eyes of the audience. It is in every breath, in every movement. Even the stenographer, whose job is to record every word without emotion, freezes for a moment. There is too much meaning in these words. This is not just a statement. It is a challenge. It is a direct attack on a man whose influence permeates the music industry, fashion brands, politics, and even charitable foundations. Clooney, a man called the moral compass of Hollywood, a friend of former presidents, an activist in international human rights movements, is making a statement that could turn the entire judicial system upside down. He is not making fleeting accusations. He is making assertions. And his assertions sound like the beginning of a war. Not in public, not in the press, but here, in the courtroom, under oath. And now this trial can no longer be called simply a trial against Combs. It is the beginning of the exposure of what has been hidden for decades, behind the glitz, money, fame, and artificially created image of untouchability. The court continues to listen to Clooney, and the audience grows increasingly silent. He recounts how it all began, not as an accident but as a carefully thought-out plan. It happened in 2013, at what seemed like a typical socialite party in the Hamptons. Everything was as usual. Expensive suits, champagne flowing, smiles, photographers. But it was there behind the scenes when the ostentatious luxury faded away that a conversation began that changed everything. Clooney recalls how Diddy approached him that evening, not with drunken laughter and jokes, but seriously businesslike. He no longer talked about show business. He had grown tired of the entertainment industry. Rap, parties, even millions of dollars. All of that, he said, was just the beginning. He was interested in power, real power, not likes, awards, or contracts. He wanted to be involved in global decision-making. "I don't want to be just a hip-hop icon," he said at the time. "I want to be at the level of the UN, at the level of the Gates Foundation. I want to talk to presidents. And you, George, are my ticket there." A slight murmur can be heard in the courtroom. Someone can't hold back a quiet sob, someone whispers to their neighbor. It's because Clooney says it without drama. He simply recounts how it was, and it is in this cold calm that the full scale of it can be felt. Clooney admits that he understood Diddy's intentions from the first glance. He sensed that he wasn't just looking for access. He was going to use it. Clooney's reputation, his connections, his image as a respected public figure. And then George came up with a plan. "If you want to catch a beast," he says, "go into its lair." He decided not to refuse. He agreed, outwardly. He smiled, nodded, participated in conversations, pretended to be on his side. But in reality, he began working against him. Carefully, discreetly, with absolute cold determination. He recorded everything, conversations, meetings, correspondence. He created a chronicle of Diddy's actions, piecing together a mosaic that now, years later, could form the basis of an indictment. It was a long, dangerous game, and now it's becoming clear that Clooney isn't just a witness. He's a deeply embedded informant working undercover in a world ruled by fear and money. His story isn't a movie. It's reality where the stakes were too high to make a mistake. Clooney tells this story not as a scene from a thriller, but as a memory that still makes him tremble inside. His voice doesn't change, but there is a heaviness in his tone. Because from this moment on, a completely different story begins. Not about elite parties or behind-the-scenes conversations, but about something sinister hidden behind a mask of luxury. He says that during the first year, Diddy behaved extremely carefully, not a step out of line. White parties, luxurious homes, millionaires, ministers, and actors in white suits discussing investments in film, charity, and, depending on the mood, the international agenda. Everything looked glossy, politically correct, flawless. Clooney played the role of an ally, but constantly kept track of who was coming, who was talking to whom, who was looking around too often. It was like a chess game. Until Diddy himself made the first risky move. One day, without warning, George receives a strange white card with no text, only coordinates and a time. 2:00 a.m. A few hours later, a message arrives from an unknown number. Wear black, leave your phone, follow the coordinates. And at that moment, the most dangerous, the most delicate, Clooney decides to go ahead. He realizes that he may be being tested. Maybe he's being set up. Or maybe everything is going exactly as he expected. He puts on black clothes, he leaves his phone behind. But he takes his watch with him. Not just a watch, but a hidden camera. He can't be sure he'll come back, but he goes. Then, as he describes it, everything turns into a scene that no director would dare to shoot. Too real, too scary. A black SUV with tinted windows, no words, no questions. He is taken to the middle of nowhere, an abandoned industrial area on the outskirts of the city. He recognizes the area. It used to be one of the pavilions of a famous amusement park. Now it is concrete, rust, and silence. Under one of the walls is an inconspicuous metal door. It can only be opened from the inside. He goes in. No one checks his documents. No one asks any questions. He is simply led further on. People in black, their faces devoid of emotion. No words, no gestures, only silence and cold, not physical cold, but psychological. It makes everything inside him shrink. And then he enters the hall, a huge underground space. The ceilings are low, the light is dim, the lamps are flickering. The music is a dull rhythm, like a heartbeat or a pulse underground. The air is like in a bunker. The space is filled with people, but not with conversation. No one laughs, no one poses. Everything looks like preparations for a performance, but no one knows what kind. There is no dancing, there are no glasses, only glances at the newcomer. And then Clooney says, "It wasn't a party, it was a ritual." He doesn't reveal what happened next, not yet. But it's clear that what he saw that night was a turning point. He was no longer just playing a game. He had entered its core, and now he is in court to tell what he saw at the heart of that darkness. Clooney pauses. The courtroom is silent. For the first time, he begins to talk about what happened inside. He recalls how he walked step by step down a long concrete corridor lit by flashing lights and found himself in a room that resembled a temple, a secret club, and a military operating room all at once. The atmosphere was almost religious, but instead of faith, there was discipline and fear. No one laughed, talked, or drank champagne. It was something else, more serious, colder. I saw faces, you know, the ones you see on TV, at summits, in movies, and on magazine covers. Actors, billionaires, former and current politicians, all dressed in identical black robes and masks. It was as if their names had been erased, leaving only their function. To be part of this, he says. He emphasizes that he did not participate. He watched silently, recorded, memorized. He says that no one pretended that it was a secret that evening. Everything that happened was arranged like a well-rehearsed ceremony. Before the start, each participant was given a document, a non-disclosure agreement. No one objected. No one even read it. They signed automatically, out of habit. They behaved as if it were normal, as if walking into an underground hall in the middle of the night wearing a mask, signing a silent contract, and participating in something they couldn't even put into words was as much a part of their career as walking the red carpet or visiting Davos, says Clooney. He says that what was happening was not a one-off event, not an eccentric gathering of millionaires. It was a system, a whole network. People weren't dragged there by force. They were lured in with promises, power, access, privileges. Some were promised meetings with heads of state, others international funds, and still others political cover. And everyone who agreed entered this circle from which there was no escape, not because they were physically held there, but because they had become part of a single mechanism. If one of them speaks out, everything will collapse. That's why they keep quiet. And that's why it works, explains Clooney. And at that moment, it becomes clear that what he is talking about is not just one night, not just one party. This is a story about something systematic, orchestrated, well thought out. And at the center of this system, according to him, stood Diddy, not just as a participant, but as a coordinator, an architect, a link, the one who knew everything and everyone. Clooney takes a deep breath and, looking straight at the jury, says, "It's time to stop pretending we don't know. It all happened, and I have proof." The courtroom seems to shrink. The air becomes thicker. The first thing he shows is a photograph. Not just a snapshot from a party, not a selfie with an actor. It is an image of a page from a book that, according to him, was lying on the security desk at the entrance to that very underground room. Not just a visitor's log, it was a kind of oath book, and everyone who entered the room had to sign it. Not for identification, but as a ritual, a symbol of belonging. He emphasizes that he did not sign it himself. He knew it would be a legal and moral trap, but he carefully memorized the page and photographed it. "I didn't know how to use it at the time, but I knew it was evidence," he says. An enlarged image of the page is presented to the court. There are dozens of names on it. Some are blurred, but among those that can be read are the surnames of well-known senators, producers, and financial tycoons. Names that are usually heard on stage or at international forums. Enough names to send shivers down the spines of those in the highest circles. Then Clooney makes his next move. He announces a second piece of evidence, a series of videos filmed with a hidden camera built into his glasses. "I knew I might not get out of there, but I was prepared. I didn't act like an actor, I acted like a spy, like a man on a mission. And that mission was the truth," he says. He describes how the camera worked. The lens was built into the frame, the sound was built into the temple, and the data was transmitted autonomously via an encrypted channel. According to him, the video recorded not only faces but also behavior. Who nodded to whom? Who gave orders? Who looked down as if they knew they were being filmed? And most importantly, Diddy himself was in the frame, not as an artist, but as a coordinator. The man people approached, whispered to, waited for a signal from. "It will be difficult to watch, I'm warning you. But it's worse to pretend it didn't happen," Clooney says. He hands the materials over to the prosecutors. The judge calls a technical recess so that the evidence can be checked, recorded, and prepared for presentation. But everything has already changed in the courtroom. The atmosphere is not just tense, it borders on panic. Because everyone understands these are no longer just words. This is paper and video, and if everything is confirmed, then the Diddy case goes beyond one person. This is no longer a trial of a producer. This is a trial of the system. Clooney stood before the court, his hands trembling slightly, from tension or from the realization of the magnitude of what was happening. But his voice was firm, confident, without doubt. He did not come here to break or destroy the people whose names appeared in that book and in those videos. His goal is not revenge or a witch hunt. He wants to show the whole world and the jury that Diddy is not just a figurehead, not a lone wolf, but the center of a huge and dangerous system. A system that has enveloped not only show business, but also the highest echelons of power, where the fates of millions are decided. He says that this network works like a spider's web. The deeper you get into it, the harder it is to get out. People become links bound by promises of power, fame, and influence. And now, as the truth begins to come out, it is not just one man's empire that is collapsing, but the entire carefully concealed system. A quiet rustling can be heard in the courtroom, the realization that Clooney's testimony could turn everything upside down. This is not just testimony, but a challenge that sheds light on the darkest corners of power and influence. Hollywood is not just glitz, red carpets, and bright smiles. It has another, darker side that few people know about. George Clooney has honestly admitted that he is not a spy or a special agent, but over the years in the film industry, he has learned to protect himself, especially when faced with a world where everything is based on secrets, betrayal, and fear. To expose Sean Diddy Combs, Clooney knew that words alone would not be enough. He needed irrefutable evidence. That's why he compiled a heavy, irrefutable database of videos and recordings, which he kept on an encrypted hard drive. This drive was hidden in a safe in his home on Lake Como, far from prying eyes. According to him, this material is direct evidence of the corrupt world that Diddy has built. A world where power is intertwined with deception, where success is built on fear, and where real decisions are made behind closed doors, hidden from the public and the media. And now Clooney is ready to lift the veil of secrecy to show how things really work. The courtroom fell silent. Even the jurors' breathing was barely audible. A video was shown on the screen that made the blood run cold. There in the frame stood Diddy, cold, motionless, his face carved from stone. He was giving orders to a group of masked men who looked like they were part of some kind of sinister cult. In the center of it all lay a guy on a red pillow. It looked like a sinister ritual, something out of the dark stories that rarely become public knowledge. The guy didn't understand what was being done to him, but the fear that slipped through even the blindfold over his eyes was clear to everyone. Clooney later admitted that at that moment he had a strong urge to intervene, to stop it all, but he held back. He understood that any sudden action could deprive him of the chance to ever show the world the truth. His task was to observe, record, and then tell everything so that justice would prevail. According to Clooney, these videos are not just recordings of violent scenes. They expose the true structure of a system built on fear and power, controlled by Diddy. The people who fell into this network were not random passers-by or mere participants in a show. They were billionaires, famous actors, influential politicians, people who portrayed themselves in public as kind, fair, and honest. But behind closed doors, they turned into completely different people, hiding their true faces. And that's where Diddy came in. He knew how to manipulate them. Using video recordings of these meetings, he kept them on a short leash like puppets. Everyone had their secrets, and he was the keeper of those secrets. The videos showed not only secret deals and money counting, but also discussions of political strategies in an atmosphere where neither laws nor moral norms applied. It was a lawless world, where power meant complete freedom from responsibility. George Clooney remained silent for a long time, and not without reason. This was not dictated by fear for himself, although he was not immune to it, but mainly by concern for his family, his wife Amal, and their children. He understood that if his revelations became public prematurely, the consequences could be catastrophic. That is why he kept all the records and evidence he had gathered secret and safe as a kind of reserve, in case the moment came when the truth could come out. Before taking the stand, he handed an encrypted hard drive containing this material to his lawyer and insisted that it be treated as a closely guarded secret. When asked in court why he had remained silent for so many years, Clooney replied that there were two reasons. The first was fear. Diddy Combs had enormous connections, resources, and influence that could reach the highest levels of power and protect him from any trouble. Clooney understood that if Diddy wanted to harm him or his family, he could do so with little effort, and no one would be able to stop him. This fear was not unfounded. It was a real threat that weighed on him every day. The second reason was the terror Clooney experienced firsthand. He recounted the details of a party in 2014 where he secretly recorded what was happening in an attempt to gather evidence. He was spotted. Diddy didn't say anything, and he just gave him a cold stare, as if to say, "You've gone too far." After that, Clooney was attacked by Diddy's men. He was beaten and drugged, after which he lost consciousness. This incident showed him the danger of the situation. It was impossible to remain silent any longer, otherwise he could lose everything forever. It was at that moment that Clooney decided that the truth had to come out, even if it meant risking his life and the safety of his family. George Clooney woke up in the hospital, but not just from his injuries. He woke up from a nightmare that almost broke him forever. He was found unconscious on the side of the road, beaten, exhausted, completely vulnerable. The doctor said that his treatment would take at least 6 months. It was a long road to recovery. But for Clooney, that was only the external struggle. Inside, he knew that the real danger was still ahead. The whole story turned out to be even darker than it seemed at first. Clooney realized that by agreeing to a deal with Diddy, he had effectively entered a closed system from which there was no escape. Diddy had drawn him into a dark scheme involving arms trafficking, covered up by fake contracts and fictitious deals. And from then on, his words were clear and harsh. "Now you're in the same boat as me." It wasn't just a hint. It was a trap that was difficult to escape. Throughout 2014 and 2015, Diddy constantly dragged Clooney into new dirty deals, each time reminding him of the threatening video. The threats were real and relentless. Letters, messages, phone calls, audio recordings. Clooney collected all of this and handed it over to the court to show the extent of the manipulation and pressure. When Clooney finished his testimony, Diddy's lawyers tried to strike back. One of them looked him straight in the eye and asked, "You, a superstar, are saying you were forced?" Clooney responded calmly, without fear, because he had the evidence behind him, and the fear of loss was too great. He had seen what happened to others who tried to speak out. They simply disappeared. And then, when the tension in the courtroom reached its peak, Diddy himself couldn't take it anymore and declared directly from the courtroom, "You're lying, George. I never touched you or your wife. This is all a show." His words were an attempt to undermine the credibility of the testimony, but for Clooney, it was just further confirmation that the truth was terrifying to his opponent. The judge glared at the courtroom, demanding immediate silence. The whispers that had filled the room a second ago instantly died down, as if they had never been there at all. The atmosphere became tense, like a taut string. Everyone present felt that something extraordinary was happening. Despite his trembling hands, Clooney looked straight at Diddy. His voice was steady and calm, but it was filled with unwavering determination. "You know the truth, and the videos don't lie." These words were not just a statement. They were a challenge to a system that had spent years hiding the truth behind a facade of luxury and fame. At that moment, time seemed to stand still in the room. People realized that this was the beginning of the end. Clooney wasn't just accusing one person. He was exposing a network of people who had previously been considered untouchable. The case files contained the names of politicians, actors, and business people, all captured in moments that send shivers down your spine. Dates, correspondence, financial transactions, everything speaks to the scale of an operation that extends far beyond the world of show business, but the price of this exposure is incredibly high. Clooney realizes that this is not just a game of reputation. His family is now in the crosshairs. Threats that once seemed distant may return with renewed force. Any wrong move could have serious consequences. But he is willing to take the risk because to remain silent is to be complicit. In the courtroom, a question hung in the air that no one dared to voice aloud. How many more dark empires, where power is fear and money is a reason to remain silent, are hidden beneath the glitz and glamour of Hollywood? This story is just the tip of the iceberg. And now the world is on the verge of discovering how many more secrets are covered by lies and fear.